Hello, and welcome back to the deep dive.
Good to be here.
Today, we are opening up our textbooks to Unit 3, Chemical Kinetics. And honestly, we are zooming in on a topic that I used to think was just, common sense. But it turns out it is actually the missing link for understanding how the universe basically holds itself together. We were talking about the collision theory of chemical reactions.
And you are absolutely right to call it the missing link. Up until this point in chemistry, like in Unit 2, thermodynamics, we usually talk about if a reaction can happen.
Right, is it feasible?
Is it spontaneous? Is it feasible? But that doesn't tell us how it happens or, how fast it happens. Collision theory is really the engine under the hood. It explains why some reactions are instant explosions and others, like, say, rusting, take years.
Exactly. And to kick things off, I want to start with a specific doubt, something that has actually bothered me since I was in school. I found the answer in our source material for today, but I want to pose it to you first because I think many students have the same question.
Go for it. What is the doubt?
Okay, so think about medicine. When you take a painkiller or an antibiotic, you swallow the pill, it goes into your stomach, it digests, enters your bloodstream. It's circulating, well, everywhere in your body. But somehow, that molecule knows to attack the bacteria causing the infection, or it knows to block a pain receptor in your head. It doesn't just start reacting with your stomach lining or your stomach cells or your, perfectly healthy liver cells. Why is that? I mean, molecules don't have brains. They don't have a GPS.
That is such a classic question.
Yeah.
And honestly, most of us just take it for granted. We think, oh, the medicine knows where to go.
Right.
But you are right. Chemically speaking, that sounds impossible. How does it select its target?
Is it magic? Is it magnetism? What is it?
It is not magic. It is geometry. And the answer lies specifically in collision theory. It explains that reactions are hyperspecific. And that specificity is what we are going to unpack today. It basically comes down to how molecules will fit together.
I love that, geometry and chemistry coming together. So let's get into the core idea. We are looking at Unit 3, specifically the collision theory. If you had to explain this to a student who is, let's say, struggling a bit with the basics and just wants the zero-level explanation, how would you describe it?
Okay. At the absolute simplest level, collision theory says that for a chemical reaction to occur, reactant molecules must crash into each other.
Okay.
They must collide. If they don't touch, they don't react. That seems obvious.
Fair enough. No contact, no reaction. If they are in separate beakers, nothing happens.
Correct. But, and this is the big but, where students often lose marks, just bumping into each other isn't enough. In fact, most collisions are completely useless.
Useless.
Completely. To actually react, they need to meet two very strict conditions. First, they need sufficient energy, and second, they need proper orientation.
Sufficient energy and proper orientation. Okay, those are the key words for the exam. But let's visualize this. The source material uses a really interesting analogy here about exchanging a package to explain these two factors. Can you walk us through that?
Yes, this is the package exchange visualization. I want you to imagine two people running past each other on a track. One person has a heavy package, maybe a medicine ball, and they need to hand it off to the other person as they pass by. Now, think about the physics of this interaction.
Okay, I'm picturing it. Two people running towards each other.
Right. So let's look at condition one, energy. If they're walking too slowly, meaning they have low kinetic energy, when they meet, they're just going to fumble it. The package is heavy. They don't have the momentum or the force to make the snap exchange. That represents the energy requirement. You need enough oomph to make the transaction happen.
That makes sense. If you are too sluggish, the bond or the package doesn't transfer. You need a certain speed.
Exactly. Now consider the second condition. Suppose they are sprinting. They are running fast enough, they have plenty of energy.
Okay.
But they run into each other back to back. Or they bump shoulders while looking in opposite directions.
The package falls, the exchange fails.
Precisely. It doesn't matter how fast they were running. To make the exchange, they need to be facing each other, hands ready, at the exact moment they pass. That is proper orientation.
I see.
So, in chemistry, molecules need both speed, which is energy, and they need to face each other correctly, which is orientation for the transaction to occur.
That is a really clear way to see it. It's not just about being in the same room, it's about the quality of the interaction. But I want to push on this a bit deeper. When we talk about people bumping into each other, it sounds, I don't know, gentle. But on a molecular level, what is actually happening during that crash?
That is a great point. When we say collision in chemistry, we are talking about a violent event on the molecular scale. Molecules are constantly slamming into each other. During a successful collision, the electron clouds of the atoms They distort. They literally squash together.
So it's forceful. It's not a polite handshake.
Very coarse. The old bonds holding the reactant molecules together start to stretch and break, and new bonds start to form simultaneously.
Huh.
But here's the catch. Breaking bonds costs money.
Okay.
It requires energy.
And that energy comes from the speed of the crash.
Correct. The kinetic energy of the moving molecules is converted into potential energy to break those bonds. If the collision is too gentle, there isn't enough energy to pay that cost. The molecules just bounce off each other like rubber balls.
Ah.
We call that an elastic collision. No reaction. The energy of the collision must exceed a specific threshold, which we call the activation energy, or EEO.
Okay, activation energy. That is a term we definitely need to remember for the exams. It's like the toll you have to pay to cross the bridge.
Absolutely. So if you want the anchor definition, the one you can write safely in your board exams, it is this. Collision theory states that reaction rate depends on collision frequency, activation energy, and orientation of reactants in collisions.
I'm going to repeat that for everyone listening because that sounds like a very distinct, mark-scarring sentence. Reaction rate depends on collision frequency, activation energy, and orientation.
Perfect. If you write that clearly, you are safe.
Now, here is where it gets really interesting, and I think this is where a lot of students, and honestly, even I, get tripped up. There is this logic that seems sound. If I increase the concentration, I have more molecules. More molecules mean more collisions. So shouldn't more collisions automatically mean a faster reaction?
That is the quantity equals quality trap. It is the most common misunderstanding we see in Viva questions. And the answer is no.
Why not? It seems so logical. More crashes, more results.
Because you are assuming every crash is a result.
Yeah.
It's just increasing the number of collisions doesn't guarantee a faster reaction if those collisions are, well, garbage.
Garbage collisions. That's a harsh way to put it, but I get what you mean.
Well, essentially, if the collisions don't have the activation energy or the right angle, they are useless. Most collisions, in fact, do not react. We call those ineffective collisions.
I see.
Only the effective collisions, the ones with enough energy and the right angle, actually count toward the reaction rate.
So it's not just about how many times you crash, it's about how many times you crash effectively. You could have 1 billion collisions, but if they are all low energy...
You get zero reactions.
Zero.
Exactly. Zero.
To help us really lock this down, let's talk analogies again. We use the package exchange for the energy part, but the source material mentions the lock and key analogy specifically for the orientation part. This feels very intuitive, especially going back to my medicine question.
Yes. The lock and key is the primary analogy for understanding the orientation factor.
Yeah.
Imagine a key in a lock. The key represents one molecule. Let's say your medicine molecule. The lock represents another molecule, maybe a receptor on a bacteria cell. Now, to open the door, which represents the reaction happening, you need two things.
Right.
First, force. You have to push the key in. You can't just gently rest the key on the hole. You need to overcome the friction. That is your activation energy.
Right. Got to push it.
But secondly, and this is crucial, the angle. The key must be aligned exactly with the keyhole. The grooves have to match. That is your proper orientation. We can have all the strength in the world, huge activation energy. But if you try to jam the key in upside down or sideways or backwards, will the lock open?
No. You'll just scratch the paint or maybe break the key.
Exactly. And this perfectly explains why you can have high energy but still no reaction if the geometry is wrong.
And this brings us back to the antibiotic, doesn't it?
It does. The medicine molecule is like a key. The bacteria has a specific receptor, which is the lock. The medicine only works because it fits that specific lock's orientation perfectly. It doesn't fit the locks on your stomach cells or your skin cells.
So it bumps into them.
It might collide with them. It might even collide with them violently. But because the orientation, the shape doesn't match, it just bounces off harmlessly.
That is a serious aha moment.
Yeah.
It's literally a geometric puzzle happening in our bloodstreams constantly. The medicine isn't smart. It's just a shape that only fits one hole.
It is. It's molecular puzzle solving.
I want to pause for a second and ask a why question. We already know from previous topics like thermodynamics and equilibrium that things like temperature and concentration affect the rate. We know that heating things up makes them go faster. Why do we need this specific collision theory? Why isn't it enough to just say heat makes it go fast?
That is a very fair question. See, knowing that heat makes it fast is an observation. It's what we see in the macroscopic world. But as chemists, we're not just observers. We are mechanics. We need a mechanism.
Meaning we need to know the machinery inside.
Yes. We need to connect the microscopic world what individual atoms are doing, to the macroscopic world, what we see in the beaker. Without collision theory, we cannot explain how a catalyst works without being consumed, or why a 10-degree rise in temperature sometimes doubles the rate rather than just increasing it by a little bit. Collision theory gives us the math and the visual model to explain the why behind the what.
Okay, speaking of visual models, I want to take our listeners to a mental movie. This is from the source material, and it's called The Dance Floor. This feels like the best way to put all these pieces together.
Oh, I love this one. It visualizes the whole system, concentration, temperature, and orientation, all at once.
All right, everyone, close your eyes for a second. Unless you are driving or operating heavy machinery, picture a crowded dance floor at a concert. The music is playing.
Okay, so the dancers are the molecules. The crowd is the concentration. More people, more likely to bump into someone.
Right. Now imagine the music is slow, a slow ballad. This is the low energy scenario or low temperature.
Right. If the music is slow, people are just swaying or walking. They have low kinetic energy. If they bump into each other, it's gentle. They just, apologize and move on. They bounce off elastically. There is no reaction, no big event.
Now the DJ drops the beat, the tempo shoots up. Techno music, this is the high energy scenario or high temperature.
Now the dancers are moving energetically. They're jumping, running around.
And here is the reaction. When two dancers collide head-on with all that high energy, let's say they grab hands and start swinging each other around, they couple up to form a product.
Exactly. But notice the orientation check here. Even if they are running fast, even if the music is fast, what happens if they bump back to back?
They just bounce off harder.
Right. They don't couple up.
Yeah.
They need that head-on, face-to-face connection plus the high energy to make the reaction happen.
I see.
So even in a high-temperature mosh pit, not every collision results in a partnership.
So the dance floor shows us everything. Low music means no energy to react. Bad dancing angles mean no reaction. You need fast music and face-to-face collisions.
That is collision theory in a nutshell.
I love that. I'm never going to look the wedding dance floor the same way again. It's just a chemical reaction waiting to happen.
Essentially, yes.
Let's move to some real-world examples. We talked about medicine, but there is a huge technology application here that affects the air we breathe. Catalytic converters in cars. How does collision theory explain that?
This is a perfect example because it brings in the concept of a catalyst. So car exhaust contains toxic gases like nitrogen monoxide, NO, and carbon monoxide, CO. We want them to turn into harmless nitrogen and carbon dioxide.
But they don't do that on their own.
They try, but inside the exhaust pipe, even though it is hot, the reaction doesn't happen fast enough. The activation energy is just too high. The collisions aren't energetic enough to break those strong bonds on their own.
So the toxic gas just comes out of the tailpipe.
Without a catalytic converter, yes. But the converter has a surface, usually metals like platinum or rhodium, that changes the game. It provides a surface for the molecules to stick to. We call this adsorption. And this changes the collision pathway.
A collision pathway. Is that like a shortcut?
Think of it like this. Instead of two gas molecules trying to find each other in midair and crash perfectly, they both stick to the metal surface. The metal actually weakens their bonds. It holds them in the right position, so it fixes the orientation problem, and it weakens the bonds, so it lowers the energy problem.
So the catalyst lowers the activation energy.
Exactly. It lowers the barrier. It makes it so that the collisions happening at that exhaust temperature are now suddenly sufficient to cause a reaction. It doesn't heat up the gas. It just lowers the bar for how much energy the gas needs to react.
It makes the unsuccessful collisions successful.
It does.
That is a critical distinction. The catalyst doesn't add energy, it lowers the requirement. It's like lowering the passing marks for an exam so more students pass.
That is the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
You don't make the students smarter, which is like adding heat. You just lower the passing grade, which is lowering the activation energy. The result is more students passing or a faster rate.
There is a stat in the source notes here that actually shocked me. It says less than 0.01% of collisions actually lead to a reaction.
It is a shocking number, isn't it?
I mean, 0.01%. That implies 99.99% of molecular collisions are a total waste of time. That seems remarkably inefficient.
In a way, yes. But flip that around. It is actually a very good thing. Think about it. Nitrogen and oxygen are colliding in the air around us right now, constantly, billions of times a second. If every collision led to a reaction, the atmosphere would turn into nitrogen dioxide instantly, and we would all suffocate.
Wow. Okay. I'm glad they are ineffective then.
Exactly. The requirements, Sufficient energy and proper orientation are very strict. That 0.01% stat explains why stable molecules don't just spontaneously explode or react instantly. Stability exists specifically because the collision theory requirements are so hard to meet.
That really puts things in perspective. It's not just a rule for the lab, it's the reason the world is stable enough for us to exist. Okay, we are getting towards the end of our dive, and I want to make sure our student listeners have their exam-safe clarity lines ready. These are the takeaways from the B4 section of our source. These are the points where, if you get them wrong, you lose the marks entirely. Let's go through them one by one.
Let's do it. These are the concepts you must not confuse.
First up, activation energy.
Remember this, activation energy is the minimum energy barrier. It's a threshold. Collisions with energy less than the aerial are just elastic, they bounce apart. If you don't hit the minimum, nothing happens. No partial credit.
Got it. Second, orientation factor, sometimes called the steric factor.
This is equally important as energy. Do not forget it. Even high-speed collisions fail if the angle is wrong. In exams, if they ask why a reaction is slow despite high temperature, check the complexity of the molecule. Big, complex molecules have a harder time twisting into the right orientation. That is the steric factor.
That is a great tip. So if the molecule is bulky, orientation becomes the main problem. Third one, catalyst function.
A catalyst works by lowering the activation energy. It provides an alternate path. Important clarity check. A catalyst does not add energy to the system. It does not heat things up. It simply makes the hill easier to climb.
And the last one, which is a big one, the temperature effect. We touched on this, but let's be specific.
Temperature has an exponential effect on the rate. This is huge. It doesn't just make molecules move a little faster. It exponentially increases the fraction of molecules that have energy greater than the other.
Can you explain that exponential part? Why is it exponential?
Imagine a bell curve of energy. Most molecules are average. Only a tiny tail end has high energy. When you increase the temperature just a little bit, say 10 degrees, you shift that curve slightly, but the area under the high energy tail, well, it doubles. So a small temperature change causes a massive explosion in the number of effective collisions.
Exponential effect.
Yeah.
That is the key phrase there. A small push in temperature creates a huge jump in reaction rate. Okay, let's wrap this up with a short summary for revision. If you are listening to this on the bus to school, here is your 60-second recap.
Okay, number one, core idea. Reaction rate depends on three things: collision frequency, energy, and orientation.
2.
2, mental image. Think of the dance floor. Only the fast dancers who collide head-on actually react.
3.
3, key example. Medicines work because of the strict lock and key orientation requirement. If the key is upside down, it doesn't work.
And 4, the big one.
And 4, critical clarity. A catalyst speeds things up by lowering the energy barrier, not by heating things up.
Perfect. That is a solid package of knowledge right there.
It really covers the bases.
Before we sign off, we like to leave you with a provocative thought, something to chew on.
Yes. We talked about how rare a successful collision is, less than 0.01%.
Right.
Because the requirements for energy and orientation are so strict. Well, think about your own body again. You are alive right now because of enzymes. Enzymes are biological catalysts, and they are so incredibly efficient that they take these rare, impossible collisions and make them happen millions of times a second with perfect specificity.
So without them,
if we relied on just random collisions, without these biological matchmakers grabbing molecules and forcing them to react, life wouldn't exist for even a second. Our metabolism is just too complex to leave to chance.
So basically, we are talking miracles of collision theory management.
We absolutely are.
I love that. Next time you are in the chemistry lab mixing chemicals, just visualize those billions of tiny collisions happening in the beaker, some bouncing off, some locking in. It's a whole chaotic world in there.
It is indeed.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive into chemical kinetics. Good luck with your studies, keep visualizing those molecules, and we will catch you in the next episode.
Happy learning.